Hey, and welcome to Tawana Talks. Thank you for viewing or listening. Today, I want to talk about a phrase, or have you ever heard the phrase, I'm not one of your little friends? Now, if your mom is over the age of 35, then you have heard this phrase. If your mom is not over the age of 35, but was raised, obviously, by someone older, then you've probably heard this phrase also. Um, I'm not one of your little friends, or I'm not your little friend. Typically, this phrase comes after you've behaved in such a way that triggers a parent to believe that we are on equal, triggers a parent to believe that you think we are on the same playing field, triggers a parent to believe that you must have lost your mind, triggers a parent to believe that you thought the person that you were talking to was not your parent, triggers a parent to believe that you grew up overnight, where now you're an adult. So the phrase, I'm not one of your little friends, comes from basically, who do you think you're talking to? Uh, the disrespect is no longer, respect is no longer a thing. Those are all of the other phrases that could be used. Another phrase that can substitute, I'm not one of your little friends, could possibly, excuse me, maybe you thought you were in school and you were having a conversation with your peers, but let me please remind you that you're not at school and you are talking to your parent. That would be a polite way to say it if your cortisol levels weren't shot up after hearing whatever it is that said child said that triggered the parent to, hey, excuse me. Another phrase could be just excuse me, not even excuse me, just excuse me. That may or should jerk the child back to reality and say, oh, yeah, I've quickly lost my mind, or I thought that I was in conversation with my besties. But I just realized, if you've heard the phrase, children, if you're listening to this, and you hear the phrase, I'm not one of your little friends, that should prompt you to do a reality check, shake it off, and think, wait, I'm sorry, who was I just talking to? And that should quickly remind you that you are not talking to one of your little friends. And as funny as it may be, I'm not talking, excuse me, as I'm not one of your little friends. As funny as that may be, we even dived into, or dived, that's not a word. We even dove into the details of that phrase. So little could be really demeaning. I'm not one of your little friends. Demeaning as if the person that you thought you were talking to did not have value. That's not where I want to go. There's probably so much history that we can unpack with the phrase, I'm not one of your little friends. But that's not even where I want to go. That got me thinking about our little friends. And I'm thinking more so of little, not in the term of a demeaning term, like less than, a less than. I'm thinking little as in age, as in younger. And I want to ask the question, and I started to ask my question, who is my little friend? Who is your little friend? And when I say that, who is the version of you that you have been holding on to? Your little friend, the little you, that you have been in companionship with as the big version of you. And so when you're operating in spaces and you show up as that little friend, you could quickly play in your mind, I'm not want to be a little friends, um, because of that version of you that you're holding on to. And so let me just unpack that a little bit. We've all been through things and experienced things in life throughout our lives that dictate, if you will, how we show up and how we react and how we behave. Because it's our compass, it's our navigator, because we operate based on experience, and sometimes we limit what we do because of a lack of experience. And so there's things that you can have self affirmations and talk to a coach and guidance. And some people just are the outgoing type where they're adventurous, if you will, in some cases, if you want to call it adventurous, depending on the task. But some people are just outgoing and can just try new things. Some people are not. And for me, just being really transparent, in some situations, I'm not. I have to do some self-talk. I have to do some guidance, and some things I'm just not going to do or I won't do. There's a lot of things that I probably said in my life that I will never do, and I did. And then there's some things in this time of my life where I'm saying, I won't do that. I'm not doing that. And that's from adventurous things to simple things, simple tasks. But there's even simple tasks that I have to talk myself into. I have to talk myself through it, to it, and things like that. And that could be stemming from life experiences or experiences with other individuals. So, and that could be stemming from my little friend that I've been holding on to. And if we are careful to identify who our little friends are, or our little friend is, being that we're talking about our younger version of ourselves, we oftentimes will operate based on the version of our little friend's experience and talk ourselves out of an experience that we could benefit from. Sometimes we will talk ourselves into things based on our little friend. And so I think that it's worth saying it's important to take time, and whatever that time looks like, whether it's jotting down experience from life, taking some time to glean and think back of who you were as a child, things that you experienced, things that maybe you've suppressed, that you've not really unpacked, uncovered, and gotten through or worked through or healed through. Because if you don't, then you will operate from the premise of your little friend, because you've not grown up from that person. Yes, we've grown up in age, and we've grown up in looks and things of that nature, and we've grown up in experiences, but there's certain things that if we have not gotten through and grew through and healed through, then we are stuck at that little friend. And that little friend becomes our best little friend, because that little friend will dictate how we show up or how we don't show up in the world. And so, who's your little friend? Be not that little friend. Grow up from that little friend. And that is difficult. And I'm not saying it like I've mastered it. I'm saying it as a revelation that I'm recognizing it. And that means that you would have to let go of that little friend. And that's difficult, because that's the friend that has been with you for so long. But letting go doesn't mean it's dismissed. Letting go of that little friend means that you are now able to tap into what that little friend was bringing to the table to be able to grow you up and get through, because that is still a part of you. But if you don't really look and dive into your childhood and recognize who that little friend is, then you're always stuck. And as a grown up, you could be responding as that little friend, you could be reacting as that little friend, even when it comes to raising your children. Sometimes, just going back to that phrase, when your child responds to something, sometimes that phrase, I'm not your little friend, or do you think I'm one of your little friends, could be from a place of the little friend. Because the child, if you listen to any of the other talks from before, there I have one that's titled, Why Are You Questioning Me? And that child may not be looking at you as one of their little friends. They may really be, excuse me, they may really be asking questions for understanding. They may be really reacting for understanding. There may be something wrong that you have to be able to listen with your eyes to uncover, because they are children and they are still growing. And so they may not be talking to you like you're one of their little friends, but you may be showing up as one of their little friends because you're operating from a space and a place that you've not grown from. And so the behaviors that you're displaying, and I'm speaking for myself too, the behaviors that I'm displaying may mimic one of their little friends. So yeah, they did think that you was one of their little friends because you're behaving in a way that one of their little friends, if you will, was behaving, yelling, screaming, having temper tantrums. And I've done it. And so it's like, well, is that what we're doing? And then you're like, whoa, I'm not one of your little friends. Like, I'm only modeling what you've shown me. And so this was just, heavy on my mind when I started just thinking about it and being able to grow through. It's always a becoming experience. I'm not saying this again to say that I've mastered it. I'm just saying that I've recognized it, and it is something that I want to work on. And so I wanted to share that with you about identifying who your little friend is and identifying what that little friend has brought to the table, what that little friend is prohibiting you from doing or becoming, and how you can begin to let go of that little friend. It's a process because that little friend has been your best friend. Here's some tips. Document times where you are in situations and how you behaved and how you would have liked to behave. Now, let me say this. Let me back up for a second. Journaling would probably be the best way to do it. If you're not in counseling or you're not seeing a counselor or a therapist or a coach, then let this be your coaching moment. A journal would be the best way to do it. A diary, if some would call it. But journaling, I think it's important to do some self-reflection on your actions and your behaviors, because I truly believe that a habit becomes a way of life. But in order to develop habits, you have to recognize what you're currently doing. And if you are satisfied with the habit that you have, then recognize what has manifested from that, and so that you can continue with that habit. But if you have habits that you are not satisfied with, then you need to unpack that so that you can start to develop new habits, recognizing your surroundings, what triggered it, what benefit or what lack came from it. And so journaling is something that I recommend. It's something that I do daily. So in that, if you're looking at who your little friend is, journaling, what behaviors you displayed that day. And that doesn't mean like unpacking your whole day, because that can become tedious and something that you just don't want to do. But if there's a moment in the day where you reacted in a way that you just were not satisfied with, or it was a moment in the day where your mood shifted and changed, or your thought shifted and changed, and it was something that was a stamping moment for you in the day, I think that it's important to journal that. And in journaling that, write down what happened with regards to not who happened, but what happened. If you spaz at your children, then write that down. And then write down how that made you feel, how that may have made others feel. And then try to think deeper, like, where did that come from? What was the real trigger of the feeling? Um, yeah, the basic thing may have been your child did not listen. Okay. But what really triggered you to react in such a way that you reacted? And then you'll start to, if you do that, you will start to see a pattern. If you start to see a pattern, then that pattern should uncover more details of, oh, these are the behaviors that are similar that triggers me to behave this way. Let me unpack that more. Where did that come from? Where did that stem from? And how can I be an agent of change? Because again, like I said, a habit becomes a way of life. But in order to create new habits, you have to be able to develop new mindsets, and you have to remove your ego to do so. And that just means removing yourself from the equation when you're thinking about, others, and when you're thinking about strengthening relationships with others, and first strengthening that relationship with yourself. And so, although we're talking about self and how do we look at who our little friend is, removing your ego for that means things like, well, I've always done this. This is how I do it, or I'm never going to do this, or I'm never going to do that. Stop for a moment, remove yourself from right now, and think about the patterns that you've created in life and the things that little friend has been conducting or leading. Yeah. Who's your little friend? Who's your little friend? Have you been your little friend?